Kat TIMPF welcomes first baby, bringing joy and celebration to Fox News family. The studio lights felt hotter than usual that evening. Kat TIMPF shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to find a position that would accommodate her very pregnant belly while maintaining the professional posture expected of a television host. The baby, her first, had been due 3 days ago, but apparently had inherited its mother's penchant for dramatic timing, as the makeup artist dabbed a fresh coat of powder on her forehead. Kat caught a glimpse of her reflection. 8 months ago, she wouldn't have recognized this woman glowing, swollen, and uncharacteristically emotional. 2 minutes to air, called the floor director. Clipboard in hand, Kat nodded. Taking a deep breath, the familiar pre-show jitters were amplified tonight by a twinge in her lower back. Probably nothing, just another false alarm. She'd had plenty of those in recent weeks. Beside her, Greg Gutfeld raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're good? You look like you're about to either deliver a baby or a particularly controversial hot take." Kat laughed, adjusting her earpiece. "I'm fine, juniors, just practicing some kickboxing moves. Must have inherited my argumentative nature." "God help us all," Greg muttered with a grin. "One Kat TIMPF in the world is plenty." The red light on camera, one illuminated. And just like that, they were lived to millions of viewers across America. For the next hour, Kat pushed through the discomfort, delivering her trademark sharp commentary and quick-witted responses nobody watching at home would have guessed. Between segments, she was timing contractions that were growing suspiciously closer together. When Catherine TIMPF first joined Fox News, she never imagined her personal life would become the subject of public fascination. She had built her career on being the witty libertarian, with a razor-sharp tongue and unfiltered opinions. Motherhood hadn't been on her immediate radar, at least not publicly yet. Here she was, July 2024, announcing her pregnancy to the world, with a characteristic blend of humor and candor. "Yes, I'm expecting. No, I won't be naming the baby after any politicians, regardless of how much they contributed to my comedy material over the years," she had quipped on air, hand resting lightly on her still flat stomach. The announcement had sent ripples through the Fox News audience. Social media exploded with congratulations, questions, and inevitably unsolicited advice. For every supportive message, there seemed to be a critic questioning her decision to continue working, her age, her lifestyle, or her politics as they related to motherhood. Kat had always been a lightning rod for controversy, but she discovered that being pregnant, in the public eye, brought an entirely new level of scrutiny. Everyone suddenly had an opinion on everything, from her choice of footwear to her caffeine consumption. The internet had transformed into a Greek chorus of judgment, with commenters playing the role of self-appointed pregnancy experts. "Shouldn't you be at home resting?" Read one comment beneath a clip of her show. "Is it safe for the baby when you get so worked up about politics?" questioned another. "You'll change your mind about gun control when you have something to protect," insisted a particularly presumptuous viewer. On air, Kat maintained her composure, occasionally addressing the comments with her trademark sarcasm. Affair, in the privacy of her apartment, she sometimes found herself scrolling through the remarks late at night, the blue light of her phone illuminating her growing belly, as she wondered why strangers felt so invested in her personal choices. Her husband would often find her this way, gently taking the phone from her hands. "You know what the doctor said about stress?" he'd remind her, placing a protective hand on her stomach. "I'm not stressed," Kat would protest. "I'm just gathering material. These people are comedy gold. I'm thinking of a new segment. Things nobody asked you to say to a pregnant woman." But the truth was more complicated. For someone who had built a career on having thick skin and an unapologetic approach to life, the sudden vulnerability of pregnancy had caught her off guard. It wasn't just her body that was changing. It was her entire relationship with the world and how it perceived her. The morning sickness had hit during her second month, right before a major interview with a controversial political figure, 5 minutes before they went live. Kat had been hunched over a toilet in the women's restroom while a concerned production assistant stood guard outside. "We can reschedule," the young woman had offered through the door. "Absolutely not," Kat had replied between heaves. "Just get me some ginger ale and mints. This baby is not running my schedule." She had emerged, pale but determined, allowed the makeup team 90 seconds to repair the damage, and proceeded to conduct one of the most hard-hitting interviews of her career. Nobody watching would have known that she had a bucket, strategically placed just off camera, or that she was surviving on nothing but salt. Teens, in sheer willpower that day, had set the tone for her approach to pregnant, working life: unapologetic, authentic, and determined not to let biology dictate her professional choices. As her pregnancy progressed, Kat found herself becoming an unexpected symbol of working motherhood in conservative media. Women wrote to her, describing how they watched her navigate pregnancy in the public eye while grappling with their own work-life balance decisions. Young professional women thanked her for demonstrating that career ambitions and motherhood weren't mutually exclusive. Some older viewers expressed surprise at finding themselves agreeing with her stance on workplace accommodation for expectant mothers. Despite disagreeing with her on other political issues, Kat hadn't asked to be a role model. In fact, the notion would have made her roll her eyes and crack a self-deprecating joke. But somewhere between the morning sickness and the baby showers, she had inadvertently become exactly that. The Fox News office baby shower been an awkward affair, as workplace celebrations often are. The conference room had been decorated with an uncomfortable mix of pink and blue since Kat had chosen not to learn the baby's sex ahead of time, and her colleagues had struggled to find the right balance between professional distance and personal celebration. Greg had salvaged the event with his toast to Kat: "The only person I know who can debate fiscal policy while creating human life. May your child inherit your wit, but not your sleep schedule." For all our sakes, everyone had laughed. Tension broken, and Kat had found herself unexpectedly emotional as she looked around at the room, full of people who had become, in their own strange way, the kind of family. Meghan McCain had pulled her aside afterward, pressed a small package into her hands. "It's a journal," she explained. "The first year goes by so fast, and being a mom in this industry is unique. Write it down, the good, the bad, all of it." Kat had been touched by the gesture, especially coming from someone who understood the peculiar challenges of balancing public life, political opinions, in motherhood. "Thanks," she'd said, uncharacteristically sincere. "I might actually use this one." "You'd better," Meghan had replied with a knowing smile, "because I'll ask you about it, and I expect details by month 7. Kat's pregnancy had become impossible to hide on camera. The wardrobe department had worked miracles, with strategic draping and carefully chosen colors. But there was no disguising the fact that she was very obviously creating new life. Rather than attempt to minimize it, Kat had leaned in occasionally, using her belly as a prop. During particularly pointed commentary, "My unborn child just kicked an agreement," she would say during panel discussions, drawing laughs from her co-hosts. The network executives had been surprisingly supportive, perhaps recognizing that Kat's unfiltered approach to pregnancy was resonating with viewers. Her segments were drawing higher ratings, and social media engagement had increased as audiences tuned in to see both her political commentary and her pregnancy journey. Not everyone had been thrilled with her decision to remain on air. Conservative viewers sometimes sent messages suggesting it was unseemly for a visibly pregnant woman to be discussing contentious political issues. Liberal critics occasionally accused her of using her pregnancy to shield herself from criticism of her political views. Kat had addressed these criticisms head-on during a particularly memorable segment. "To those concerned about my pregnant body being on your television screens, I promise the baby can't hear your political opinions. And your political opinions won't affect my baby. This miraculous ability to separate biological functions from intellectual discourse is what makes humans special. Well, some humans." The clip had gone viral, shared by women across the political spectrum, who appreciated her refusal to be sidelined by her physical state as her due date approached. The online commentary had intensified. Medical professionals questioned her decision to work so close to delivery. Conservative commentators praised her commitment to her career, while simultaneously suggesting she might want to consider taking more time off after the birth. Liberal critics analyzed her every statement about maternity leave policies, looking for hypocrisy or inconsistency. Through it all, Kat had continued showing up, her belly now unmistakably leading the way as she walked onto the site each evening. The makeup team had joked about needing extra time in her schedule just to cover all the additional surface area. "I'm not just blowing," Kat had quipped. "I'm practically a lighthouse at this point." But behind the jokes and the professional composure, the physical toll had been mounting. Her feet swelled painfully after standing under the hot studio lights. Her back ached constantly. Sleep had become an elusive luxury, as the baby seemed determined to practice Olympic gymnastics precisely when she needed rest. Her doctor had gently suggested cutting back her hours. Her husband had more forcefully suggested the same. Kat had compromised by reducing her appearances on other shows, but had insisted on maintaining her regular role. On Gutfeld, it's not just about the job. She had explained to her concerned husband, "It's about not letting biology dictate my choices." When men never have to make the same calculations, he'd understood, even as he worried that was part of why she loved him. His ability to support her choices, even when they made him anxious. He'd started packing her a special kit for work, compression socks, a discreet back support, herbal tea for nausea, and a fully charged phone with his number on speed dial. Just in case, he'd said, kissing her goodbye each evening as she headed to the studio. Just in case had become their shorthand for the unspoken possibility that the baby might decide to make its debut during a live broadcast, a scenario the Kat found both terrifying and perversely amusing. The contractions had started during the commercial break, intensifying as the segment progressed. By the time they cut to the final break, Kat could no longer ignore the pain radiating through her lower back and abdomen. The baby was coming, and with her characteristic sense of dramatic timing, was apparently determined to make an entrance that would be talked about in the Fox News break room for years to come. "I think," Kat said calmly to Greg, as the cameras turned away, "that we might need to call my husband, and possibly an ambulance." Greg's eyes had widened comically. "Are you? Is it right now? Unless I suddenly developed the ability to spontaneously combust from my uterus outward." "Yes, it appears to be happening right now." The studio had erupted into controlled chaos. The floor director had called for a replacement host, while simultaneously phoning for medical assistance. Kat's producer had called her husband, who was apparently already in a taxi, headed toward the studio. Having noticed something off in her delivery during the previous segment, through it all, Kat had maintained her composure, breathing through contractions and cracking jokes between waves of pain. If reading spiked during this last segment, she told Greg through gritted teeth, "I'm going to demand a bonus." They managed to get her offset during the commercial break, transitioning smoothly to a replacement host, who explained Kat's sudden absence with Professional.com that belied the frantic activity taking place backstage. By the time the ambulance arrived, Kat was being attended to by the studio's first aid officer in her dressing room, her husband holding her hand, while she alternated between deep breathing and colorful commentary on the sensation of labor. "I take back every sarcastic thing I ever said about natural childbirth advocates," she gasped as another contraction gripped her. "This is not natural, this is supernatural. This is biological warfare, being waged from within my own body." Her husband had stroked her hair, looking simultaneously terrified and amused. "Save some of these zingers for after the epidural, honey." The paramedics had arrived with efficient gom, assessing the situation and preparing to transport her. One of them, a young woman with bright eyes, had recognized Kat immediately. "Oh, wow, I watch your show all the time. My husband and I were just talking about your last segment on healthcare policy." Kat, in between contractions, had managed a weak smile. "Always happy to meet a fan, though I prefer under different circumstances. Preferably when fewer people are staring at my cervix." The paramedic had laughed, then become professionally serious again. "We're going to take good care of you, Ms. Temp, both of you." As they wheeled her out through the back entrance of the studio, Kat had been struck by the surreal juxtaposition of the moment. From delivering political commentary to delivering a human being, all within the space of an hour. Somewhere in the pain and excitement and fear, she'd found the absurd humor in the situation. It was, after all, perfectly on brand for her, unexpected, unfiltered, and completely authentic. Her last conscious thought, before being loaded into the ambulance, was to wonder if her water breaking on set would violate any union regulations about workplace hazards. The news of Kat TIMPF going into labor live on air, or nearly so, spread through social media, faster than breaking political news. By the time she reached the hospital, #Kat's TV baby was trending nationwide, with viewers sharing clips of her final segment and speculating about whether subtle signs of labor could be detected in her expression and body language. her Fox News colleagues had rallied immediately, sending messages of support, and in typical fashion for the close mid-media world, continuing to work even as they worried about her. The show must go on, especially in 24-hour news. In the delivery room, removed from the cameras in the public eye, Kat had experienced the transformation that countless women before her had undergone, the intense vulnerability and power of bringing forth new life. For someone accustomed to having a quick comeback for every situation, she had found herself momentarily wordless when the doctor had placed her newborn child on her chest. "Well, hello there," she had finally whispered, studying the tiny perfect face with wonder. "You certainly know how to make an entrance. You're definitely my kid." Her husband, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, had leaned in to embrace them both. "Definitely your kid," he'd agreed. "Already has perfect dramatic timing." In that moment, all the opinions, all the criticism, all the unsolicited advice had faded into irrelevance. The only reality that mattered was the small, warm weight on her chest, and the overwhelming love that crashed through her with the force of a tidal wave. Later, when the initial rush of emotion had settled into a quieter wonder, Kat had reached for her phone to share the news. Her fingers had hovered over the keyboard as she contemplated how to announce this most personal of developments to her very public world. In the end, true to form, she had opted for authenticity laced with humor. Breaking news: newest tiniest TIMPF has arrived. Mother and baby doing well. The one of us is significantly more dignified than the other right now. Hint: it's not the one who's been on television. The response had been immediate and overwhelming. Messages from colleagues, fans, fellow public figures, and even some of her most vocal critics, all united in celebration of new life. The political divisions that typically characterized her online interactions had temporarily dissolved. In the face of this, most universal of human experiences, Meghan McCain had been among the first to call, her voice warm with genuine emotion. "Welcome to the club," she'd said. "The hours are terrible, the critics are relentless, and the compensation is non-existent, but it's the best job you'll ever have. So basically, just like working in cable news, but with more bodily fluids." Kat had replied, her voice tired but happy. Meghan had laughed exactly. Though the audience is more demanding, but ultimately more forgiving. The first few weeks had passed in a blur of sleepless nights, hormone-induced emotional swings, in a crash course in the humbling realities of new parenthood. Kat, who had built a career on being meticulously prepared and quick on her feet, found herself repeatedly outmaneuvered by an 8-pound human with no verbal skills but an uncanny ability to sense precisely when she had just settled into sleep. Her husband had taken family leave, providing essential support as they navigated the early days together. They had established a night shift system, tag-teaming the endless cycle of feeding, changing and soothing. During one particularly challenging 3 a.m. session, after the baby had finally fallen asleep, they had collapsed onto the couch, together in exhausted solidarity. "Remember when we used to discuss fiscal policy and the philosophical underpinnings of libertarianism?" Kat had whispered, careful not to wake the finally sleeping infant. "Vaguely," he replied, equally quietly. "Now, our most intellectual debates are about diaper brands, and whether that noise was a burp or the prelude to projectile vomiting. And yet, strangely, these seem like the more important conversations now." He had squeezed her hand in the darkness. "You know what's really wild? You're still the same Kat Temp who takes no prisoners on national television. You just also happen to be someone's mom." That observation had stayed with her. In the weeks that followed, the realization that motherhood hadn't erased or diminished her existing identity, but had added new dimensions to it. She was still the sharp-witted political commentator, the libertarian with finely honed opinions on government. Over each, she was also now a mother, fiercely protective of a small life, newly sensitive to policies and social structures that would shape her child's future. The question of when to return to work had loomed large. Kat had initially planned on taking the minimum time off, determined to prove that motherhood wouldn't derail her career trajectory. But as the weeks with her newborn had passed, she found herself reassessing that timeline. "Maybe another month," she had told her producer during a check-in call. "I'm just not. I need a little more time." "Take what you need," had been the surprisingly understanding response. "The audience misses you, but they'll wait. Some things are more important than television." That conversation had prompted a deeper reflection on the very public opinions she had expressed about work, family, and gender roles. Throughout her career, had she been too glib, too dismissive of the genuine challenges faced by working mothers? Had her previous stance on parental leave policies been informed by actual understanding of the realities? One sleepless night, nursing the baby, while scrolling through old clips of her show, she had confronted her own evolution. Perhaps this was the most profound impact of motherhood. Not just the love for her child, but the way it forced her to reconsider perspectives she had once held with unshakable certainty. When she eventually did return to the air, it was with both a renewed commitment to her principles and a more nuanced understanding of their application in real lives. Her first segment, Back, included a characteristically candid reflection on her journey. I still believe in individual choice and limited government intervention in our personal lives, she told viewers. But I now understand with painful clarity why accessible childcare, flexible work arrangements, and supportive community structures aren't just nice to have, they're essential infrastructure for a functioning society. You can maintain your political principles while acknowledging that the real world is messier than pure ideology allows for. In fact, I'd argue that if your principles can't accommodate reality, it might be time to reconsider them. The segment had generated predictable controversy, with some accusing her of going soft and others celebrating her evolved perspective. Kat had found herself unusually untroubled by the criticism. From either direction, there was a certain freedom in having witnessed the miracle of birth and the grueling reality of newborn care. It had a way of putting online comments into proper perspective. 6 months after the dramatic, almost on-air birth, Kat TIMPF sat in her dressing room, scrolling through photos of her baby on her phone, while the makeup artist prepared her for that evening's show. On the small screen, a chubby face smiled gummily at the camera. Eyes that were starting to change from newborn blue to a color remarkably similar to her own, staring with innocent curiosity at the world. 5 minutes, Kat called the floor director from the hallway. On my way, she replied, slipping the phone into her pocket. As she walked toward the set, she reflected on the journey of the past year. From announcement to birth to this new reality of working motherhood, nothing had gone according to plan. Yet somehow, everything had unfolded exactly as it should. The hot studio lights no longer bothered her the way they once had. Her body, though changed by pregnancy, had regained its strength in new and surprising ways. Her mind, despite the sleep deprivation and constant multitasking required of new parents, felt sharper, more focused on what truly mattered. When the camera's red light illuminated, Kat TIMPF smiled, the same confident, slightly mischievous smile that had become her trademark. But behind that familiar expression was a woman transformed, not diminished, by the addition of mother to her many roles. Welcome to the show, she began, making direct eye contact with the camera lens, in through it with millions of viewers. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. And they did politics, culture, controversy, and comedic moments. But underlying it all was the unspoken reality that life goes on, people grow, perspectives evolve, and sometimes the most profound statements are made, not through words, but through living authentically in front of others. For Kat TIMPF, commentator, comedian, lightning rod, and now mother, the most powerful platform wasn't the television studio, but the example she set by navigating her personal and professional lives with honesty, humor, and an unapologetic commitment to being fully herself. In all her evolving complexity, as news of her journey spread throughout the Fox News family and beyond, it served as a reminder that behind the political debates and cultural divisions that dominated the airwaves, there remain the universal experiences that connected us all: love, family, growth, and the courage to let life changes while still remaining true. Dark core. In newsrooms and living rooms across America, people who had never met Kat TIMPF personally found themselves smiling at the updates on her new chapter, perhaps recognizing in her story elements of their own. The challenges of balancing aspirations with realities, the way children reshape our priorities, and the unexpected joy found in embracing life's most fundamental transformations. For this was the real headline. Beyond the politics and the punditry, life continues its miraculous unfolding, one tiny human and one opened heart at a time, rewriting our stories in ways we never could have scripted ourselves.